Welcome to Book Nook, brought to you by the Quincy Public Library. The Quincy Public Library, all kinds of fun activities coming up for the summer. Make sure you check it out, especially if you have kids, at quincypubliclibrary.org. Joining us, the local author, Bobbe White. Thanks for coming along.
Thanks for asking me.
You just published a new book.
I did.
Titled?
Title is, Wait, What? We're the Parents Now, and the subtitle pretty much sums it up. Navigating the ups and downs when a loved one's health decline gets real.
Yeah, and something you lived through.
Yeah, so far 3 times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And what made you want to tell the story?
I hadn't planned on writing a book, honestly. When I don't really know what to do and I get kind of confused and frazzled, when my dad started declining in mental health, I journaled about it. And I just wrote down things that were happening, and then I encouraged the nurses, the caregivers where he lived, to tell me funny things that happened, not to make fun of him, but that's just my way of coping.
Right.
And they did it, and it was so helpful.
Yeah, and humor is a big part of your life, and it's a big part of you speak about humor going into businesses and stuff like that, and humor is not a bad way necessarily to deal with some of this tragic stuff that you have to go through as a son, daughter, niece, nephew, caretaker.
True, and that's my way. So some of my humor is dark, and a lot of people don't understand that. So you kind of have to know your audience who will be open to that.
Yeah.
So
what is basically, this is not a how-to book.
Not really. This is a compilation of stories, a lot of my stories, mostly my stories about my mom and dad. I didn't go into any other family members, and then I started hearing people tell me stories. Well, I worked at the bank for 100 years, and it seemed like people gravitated towards my desk that were going through something similar, or were in the beginning of it, or somewhere in it, and it was just everybody had something going on, and it occurred to me that this is pretty universal. So some of the stories that people shared with me were just wild, like too good to not make a note of. And so I don't know when this occurred to me, but I'm like, I want their stories in my book. And so I would ask permission, and I didn't have anybody turn me down. Most of them would, they wrote their own, but a lot of them just had me write it, and then I'd run it by them.
Right.
But they still are doing, I still run into that.
Yeah, it's you're almost in a situation where you didn't know when to stop writing, correct?
That was hard, yeah. I finally, my illustrator said, no more stories.
Yeah, and your illustrator is?
Laura Gramke. She is originally from Quincy, and she is now in Charlotte, North Carolina area. And she was an art major at Western, and she's done stationery. She has painted pictures of all of our dogs from photographs. She's amazing. So she illustrated it for me.
So you have it divided up into chapters, correct?
Correct.
So you category each chapter in a specific way.
Right. So you want me to go through those?
Oh, just a few. You could touch on a few of them. I'm just curious how you had it divided up.
Well, there's not that many. So the first one is changes are showing up. And that's just when things are just a little off, and you're like, no, there's a lot of denial at that stage. And things that you think, oh, they're just busy, or they're just having a off day or something. So changes are coming up, and sometimes you think, okay, this is getting a little more real. The second chapter is called Tough Topics. That's the hard one. That was the one where I talked about taking my dad's keys away, and that is probably the hardest thing most families have to deal with. And another hard part is when you have to move them from home to assisted living, and then you're like all settled, like, don't get too settled, because your next stop is nursing home. So the third is humor. Humor happens, and it's good, because that's what breaks up our stress. And the fourth one is memorable memories, the ups and downs. And that was kind of my catch-all for everything. I didn't know where to put everything else. And then the fifth one is lessons learned. Right. A lot of those.
So, and again, this is not a how-to book, and there is no right or wrong way to deal with a parent, whether it's do the caregiving yourself, or, hate to say farm it out, but, assisted living, things along those lines.
Yeah, every family is so unique depending on, there's a lot of moving parts in every family. And I know there will be some people that maybe read it and think, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't handle it that way. Well,
but that's okay.
Yeah, and I say it, I think a couple of times throughout, that the main thing is the right thing. It's not the easiest thing. It's not the most popular thing, but the main thing is the best thing.
And there's a lot of family dynamic that goes on.
Oh, yeah.
During these
right. And I don't
times.
care if you're a family of one or you have 17 children. It's just not easy. When you have one, it all falls on that person. When you have two, you can have a divided camp. When you have more than that, it's just not always in consensus. And I have one sister, and I feel like we tag teamed pretty well. There was only two of us, and my mom lived longer than my dad. But as far as doing things, it was my sister and I.
So, is there a common theme? I know you have chapters, but is there a common theme throughout what you heard from other people? I'm assuming it's difficult, that type of thing, but a specific thing that kept coming up when they were dealing with a elderly person. I guess it doesn't have to be elderly, but
no,
someone
it doesn't. And that's another thing. I'm glad you said. I'm going to go off track for 1 second here, because it's not just about parents. And that's why I use loved ones interchangeably, because it can be a spouse, a partner, sister, brother, uncle, aunt, a friend. And I think the main thing is you want to help them, and then sometimes it's out of your reach. You just can't help them, and that's when you have to go for more help, and that's probably the hardest thing.
Yeah, and a lot of it is because that person doesn't want help necessarily, because
sometimes
they're run into a lot of denial.
Well, they are, and also sometimes the people that we're closest to, or I had somebody tell me this. Actually, she wrote a story in here. It's not because people don't want you there or they're not nice to you, but they don't feel good. Or they just don't want to talk. And this story was about someone and her friend. So they were the same age, been best friends for years. And she said, when I go visit her, she's just not nice to me.
Yeah.
But she knows that's okay. It's not about her. It's about the patient.
So how many of the stories are about taking something away or removing something from that person's life? Because I lived through that. You've lived through that. A lot of my friends are going through that right now. And basically the person not accepting that they're in that situation.
There are quite a few. We're just all over the place in the book. It's just so many situations, but yet they're all possible.
Yeah.
So I couldn't really say.
So someone wants to pick up a copy of your book?
Yes. So right across the street, Enchanted Books, new bookstore in the district, has a supply. I have a supply if they want to email me at bobbewhite@gmail.com, and that's BOBBEWHITE. And then on Amazon.com.
Okay. When you finally put the rubber stamp on the book and I'm done, how did you feel about it?
Good. It's like, I'm done.
It's like having a baby. It's out. I'm done.
Kind of. It's really hard to know when you're done, though. And even when
especially on a topic like this.
Yeah, and honestly, I haven't opened it since it's been published, because Murphy's Law says the first page an author turns to, they'll find a typo.
Yep. Well, thanks for coming in.
All right, thanks.
All right, that's Bobbe White. And name of the book again is We're the Parents Now. And again, the topic is taking care of people that had taken care of you for most of your life.
True.
All right, this has been the Book Nook, brought to you by the Quincy Public Library. Check them out, quincypubliclibrary.org. I'm Ron Kinscherf for Muddy River News.
Muddy River News. Our home, our news.